Good afternoon. I'll call to order this remote meeting of the House Commerce Committee and ask Mr. Brown to take the roll.
Chair Stephenson. Vice Chair Katiza-Wattoon.
Present.
Representative O'Driscoll. Representative Barr.
Here.
Representative Carlson.
Carlson present.
Representative Davnie.
Davnie present.
Representative Elkins.
Present.
Representative Haley. Representative Cagle. Representative Lee.
Lee present.
Representative Lilly.
Lilly present.
Representative Liz Lagarde. Representative Lucero.
Yes, sir.
Representative Olson.
Present.
Representative Farr.
Present.
Representative Rasmussen.
Rasmussen present.
Representative Richardson.
Present.
Representative Tice. We know he's present, but I'll call again. Chair Stephenson.
Present.
Representative O'Driscoll. Representative Haley. Representative Cagle. Representative Liz Lagarde. And Representative Tice.
Tice here.
Thank you. And I think we have Representative Haley in the chat or in the Zoom, but she has not said anything.
It's Tama.
Quorum is present. The first item on our agenda is the approval of our meetings from our last minute.
Mr. Chair, I had trouble getting in on Zoom here. As you know, this part of the building has some difficulty with the internet. Just want to make sure that I'm present, O'Driscoll.
And Mr. Brown gives the thumbs up that he has reflected such in the minutes. Representative Katiza-Wattoon, have you had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting?
I have, Mr. Chair. I would move the minutes from March 9th.
Representative Katiza-Wattoon moves the approval of the minutes from the March 9th, 2021 meeting. Any discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion prevails and the minutes from March 9th, 2021 are approved. We are today having a meeting that will occur in two parts. We will meet from now until 5 o'clock and consider hopefully 4 bills. We will then recess for caucuses and return at 6:30 to do the rest of our agenda. The first bill on our agenda today is House File 586. Welcome to the committee, Representative Mary Murphy. I will move House File 586 be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Transportation, Finance, and Policy. And Representative Murphy, we have an author's amendment to your bill as well. It's labeled A210024. Should we take care of that now?
I really wish you would because it's a much simplified definition of volunteer driver, and everybody agrees that this part of the bill is the bill to pass.
Excellent. So I will move the A210024 amendment, which gets the bill in the shape the author would like us to consider it. Any further discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the motion prevails and the A21-0024 amendment is adopted. Representative Murphy, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All of you know some senior citizens. Some senior citizens can drive just fine, but others can't or don't have a license, or they need help to get around. And the volunteer drivers across the state of Minnesota that are working with a nonprofit agency or the county social services there are many different kinds of volunteer driver services, but they're known all across the state, and they bring people together. They bring people to the dentist. They bring people to the grocery store. They bring people to town, or they bring people from one town to another town in some cases. But they're volunteer drivers that do this of their own free will in their own vehicles. and their accident rate is almost zero. So it's a very reliable service if people know about it and if there's a definition. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, there were lots of discussions about House File 586, but they didn't have this amendment that you just put on. And this simplifies it, and it makes it understandable of who is a volunteer driver and how they can assist the community as a whole, and all senior citizens don't have to rely on their kids, or in many cases, people they don't know at all. And so this was initiated by the Department of Transportation, and John Dukich is here to explain why the Department of Transportation is concerned about volunteer drivers.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Mr. Dukich.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the record, John Dukich with the Office of Government Affairs at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And I'd like to begin by thanking Representative Murphy for authoring this bill, and for you, Mr. Chair, for taking the time today to hear it. The bill, as amended, represents a collaborative effort between MnDOT, the Departments of Commerce and Human Services, the trial lawyers, and the Minnesota Public Transit Association to address an issue whereby some volunteer drivers are being perceived by insurance agents as transportation network company drivers or commercial vehicle drivers, which they are not. And this misclassification can lead to an increase in premiums for volunteer drivers, or in some cases, the decision by volunteers to simply forego the experience because of a concern about a change in their insurance coverage. And as Representative Murphy mentioned, volunteer drivers use their personal vehicle and are reimbursed for mileage to help people get around town, to bring them to doctors' visits or cancer treatments, to the grocery store, and run other errands that they might not otherwise be able to do. And this bill, as amended, simply, we hope, helps to clarify what a volunteer driver is and what a volunteer driver is not. And specifically, the bill defines a volunteer driver as an individual who transports persons or goods on behalf of a nonprofit entity or governmental unit in a private passenger vehicle and receives no compensation for services provided other than for the reimbursement of actual expenses. And this helps, we think, to clarify what they are, and it stipulates as well that they are not a commercial vehicle driver. And so, the bill looks quite long, and that's simply because it updates various statutes where the term volunteer driver is used, transportation statutes where this term comes up, and it simply refers back to the definition provided here to make clear what a volunteer driver is and what they are not. And we hope that this bill provides some clarity to volunteer drivers across the state and helps ensure that they continue to provide crucial services for those who need it most. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Dukich. There are no additional testifiers who signed up, so now would be a time for member discussion and question. Any discussion to the bill? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that this is a great accommodation, and I've been watching this and have been close to this issue for the last few years, and I invite members to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Any further discussion to the bill? Hearing none, I will turn it over to Representative Murphy for a closing comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. And I believe this bill, as amended, should go to the floor. Is that right?
I think we're headed to transportation, finance, and policy next.
Okay.
Chair Murphy.
Okay, I'll grease the skids there.
Sounds good. Well, with that, I will just note that Representative Murphy, you said that the bill difference between this bill and the one 3 or 4 years ago was the amendment, but I'll also note it has a different author now, you, and I think that might actually be the difference this time around and why it's moving and being successful. So thank you for bringing the bill, and I will renew the motion that House File 586 as amended be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Transportation, Finance, and Policy. Mr. Brown will take the roll. The chair votes aye.
Vice Chair Katiza-Witten.
Aye.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Aye.
Representative Barr.
Aye.
Representative Carlson.
Aye.
Representative Davney.
Dabney, aye.
Representative Elkins.
Aye.
Representative Haley.
Aye.
Representative Lee.
Lee, aye.
Representative Lilly.
Lily, aye.
Representative Lucero.
Yes.
Representative Olson.
Aye.
Representative Farr.
Aye.
Representative Rasmussen.
Rasmussen, aye.
Representative Richardson.
Aye.
And Representative Tice. Representative Tice.
Tice, aye.
With 16 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and House File 586 as amended is recommended to be referred to the Committee on Transportation, Finance, and Policy. Thank you again, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Representative Stephenson. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The next item on our agenda is House File 970. Welcome to the committee, Representative Vang. I will move House File 970 be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Health, Finance, and Policy. Representative Vang, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to present House File 970. This is the third committee stop, so some of you may have already heard much of this bill. What this bill does is opens the door to critically and comprehensively address a long-standing problem, a shortage of mental health providers. It is no secret that we have a dire mental health workforce shortage that needs to be addressed, especially in light of the increased needs due to the pandemic. For a long time, poor access to mental health care include rural communities where individuals are less likely to have a mental health treatment facility than metro counties. Communities of color are less likely to get the treatment they need, and low-income communities are less likely to have mental health treatment resources than high-income communities. We are hearing more calls for mental health, yet we don't have the providers to meet the demand. This bill is a product of coalition work among advocates in our institutions over the years. What is relevant to this committee's jurisdiction is Section 1. What Section 1 does is aligns what is already in current practice. The care provided by clinical trainees is already paid for by Medicaid and Minnesota Care, along with some private health plans. So this just also aligns that the care provided by clinical trainees be also paid for by private insurance. And the reason why this is important is because when insurance does not pay for care and treatment, it creates a barrier for a provider to offer supervision for these trainees, and may result in the clinical trainee paying for the supervision needed to be licensed. And with that, I do have testifiers who can explain further about this section and the significance of this bill.
Thank you, Representative Vang. The first testifier I have is Pahua Vang.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you so much for your time today. In order to give every Minnesotan who needs it the very best opportunity for help and recovery, we need high quality mental health and substance use disorder services. And in order to provide high quality treatment, we need competent clinicians. To develop competent clinicians, we need sustainable ways to train and mentor our pipeline of clinical trainees. Clinical trainees in my testimony today refer to people who are advanced students in a graduate program in an area of mental health, so social work, psychology, counseling, marriage and family therapy, or more commonly, clinicians who have already graduated with their master's or doctorate and are working under the supervision of another provider. As part of their training, clinical trainees receive practice experiences under the direct supervision of licensed mental health professionals in their field. In order to become a fully licensed mental health professional in one of these fields, clinical trainees must graduate from either a master's or a doctoral program. And then there are some very specific requirements for each of the fields represented here that clinical trainees must meet. But in general, after graduation, part of the requirement is that we continue to work under the supervision of a fully licensed board-approved supervisor in our field for a specified length of time. And then we take a national exam in our field. And if we pass, we then become eligible for full licensure. And once fully licensed, we're able to practice independently. Having been both on the supervisee and supervisor end of the training and licensing path, building a competent workforce takes time and is very much a critical part of strengthening our healthcare system. After the pandemic, it's going to be especially even more crucial that we have a strong system that is able to respond to the mental health needs of Minnesotans across the state. And part of doing that means making the work of clinical trainees a sustainable part of our healthcare system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next testifier is Sue Abderholden from NAMI. Ms. Abderholden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, Sue Abderholden, Executive Director of NAMI Minnesota, and we strongly support this bill. As has been mentioned, we have a severe workforce shortage in Minnesota. And one thing I want to make sure that you understand is that the Department of Health did a study, and between 2007 and 2014, they found that only 49.1% of our graduates from these programs actually became licensed. What we know in the series of discussions that we had around the state is being able to find supervision was a key factor in them not becoming licensed. And I think you could certainly understand that if we're losing half of our people after they graduate not to become licensed, we could really be solving our workforce shortage. I also want to make sure you understand, though, so the barrier that Dr. Yang talked about is real. So if the provider can't actually bill for the service that's being provided by the clinical trainee, it makes it really hard for them to provide the supervision. And often what happens is people have to pay for supervision and not get paid for the work that they do, which I think you can understand would be pretty untenable. I want to make sure that the committee understands that this is not a new mandate. We are not adding any particular types of services. We're just clarifying who can provide the current mandated services. This is already provided for under Medicaid and Minnesota Care. We've not had any problems in terms of quality or issues. This has been a longstanding policy. And while some private insurance does pay for it, not all. And so again, we're just trying to address one of the barriers, one of the many barriers that people face in terms of getting their final license. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other testifiers signed up this afternoon, so we will move to member discussion. Representative Haley.
Thank you, Chair Stephenson, and thank you, Representative Vang, for bringing this bill forward. I'm not sure if my question is for you or for Ms. Abderholden, but I'm curious, when you talk about the length of time that a trainee needs to be supervised, can you just give me a perspective on that? How many clients that they would need to see, or if it's a specific time frame versus visits that are required?
We also have Sam Sands from the Board of Psychology on the Zoom. I don't know, Representative Vang, if you want that question or if you want Mr. Sands to tackle it.
Mr. Chair, I will defer this question to whoever can elaborate on this.
And I don't know, Mr. Sands or Ms. Abderholden.
Mr. Sands can add, but I will just say it's not the number of clients, and it's the number of hours that you're supervised. And I can quick look it up. I know for one group it's 2,000, for another it's 4,000, but it's based on the number of hours of supervision.
Mr. Sands, do you have anything to add to that?
Mr. Chair, Representative Haley, thanks for the opportunity to answer this question. What I would say is it differs between the professions. So for the Board of Psychology, we license psychologists, and they do 1,800 hours of psychological practice between when they graduate and when they become licensed. So it would be those 1,800 hours where they would be under this clinical supervision. Some people do more than that. Some people, they have to do that minimum level hours. Social work practice, I won't speak for social work or marriage and family therapy or Board of Behavioral Health, but they do have varying hours of supervision time that their licensees or their applicants also have to get supervision before they can become fully licensed.
And Representative Haley, just for your, we do have also representatives from the Board of Marriage and Family Therapy and the Board of Social Work. So if you require additional information, you can turn to them. I do see you shaking your head no. So Representative Haley.
That's fine. I'm trying to respect our committee time this evening. So thank you for that answer. I just wanted some perspective, and I'm somewhat familiar with this issue, and just really want to offer support for the bill. Our workforce shortage is severe, and the pandemic and all the ancillary issues related to that will only, or have really only increased the mental health crisis from youth all the way to seniors that have been in lockdown. So this need is great, and I appreciate you bringing it forward and offer my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the bill author, Representative Vang, for bringing this bill forward. I think all of us have heard in our communities about the mental health workforce shortage, and I appreciate this bill's efforts to improve that in our communities across the state of Minnesota. I know Representative Vang, when we heard this bill earlier in Human Services, I had expressed some concerns around the insurance coverage and how that would impact costs of health insurance. And after talking with some of the health plans, they're not concerned with this language. That they express that a lot of their members already cover this, and so wouldn't impact a lot of their coverage. And so I'm happy to be supporting the bill today and appreciate your work on this important topic.
Thank you. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have one question here, or actually maybe possibly two questions, depending on the answer. I would draw the bill author's attention to line 9.19. I see there are two instances of it. Beginning on line 8.32, and this is in the continuing education section of the bill. So lines 8.32 through 9.2, and then again 9.19 through 9.22. And the question I have for the bill author is, when I read these lines, I'm just wondering, for example, line 9.19, why are we focusing on the strengths that exist in various cultures and not the other half of the equation, weaknesses? Line 9.20, why are we only focusing on the differences between cultural groups and not the similarities or commonalities? Line 9.21, why are you focused on teaching the oppression, and how about the other side of that, which would be the empowerment? Because every part of this, there's two sides of every coin. And when I read this, these three examples, it seems to be a focus on just one side, when there's another side, I think, that would give a greater picture to those going through continuing ed. I'm just wondering if the chief author could comment why these particular focus.
And I'll give Representative Vang a chance to speak to that. I would just note that, as Representative Vang alluded to, significant portions of this bill are in effect statutes that are not within the committee's jurisdiction. The portions that you're referencing are housed in Section 148, which is in the Department of Health's section of law relating to the continuing ed requirements there. The bill is being referred from this committee to the Health Finance Committee. So I don't want to go on this, but I'm happy to give Representative Vang a chance to answer your question. I just wanted to note that.
Yeah, totally. And I appreciate it. And the reason I'm asking is when I see the words continuing ed, regardless of the statute, as a real estate agent, having to go through continuing ed, as a general contractor, continuing ed. So I'm just asking those questions in that regard. So thank you.
I understand. Representative Vang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Lucero, for your question. This part section has been discussed in previous committees and will be continued to discuss in fleshed out in the Health Finance Committee next. However, I can entertain your question in that we recognize that we are a growing demographic here and in a state that continually changing with a great asset to diversity. We know that the providers that we have currently do not reflect the population of the state. And so this is a process, this is part of where we can continue to be more competent in being outside of our own bubble, and that we can continue to reach a place where we can better serve the communities that now are part of this state as well.
Representative Lucero?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that. But for those who might be in a bubble, or for those who we're trying to expand beyond what they're familiar with, right? It's the totality of information, right? If you're going to look at, you're only concerned about the differences. Well, how about the commonalities? Because I think that we, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of race, regardless of religion, I believe we have a lot more in common than we do with differences. So it would be my hope that you would consider in these next committees that you would discuss, that you would entertain some language that says something to the effect of allowing for the differences and commonalities between cultural groups. Why are we just focusing on the division part? Focusing on the strengths and the weaknesses of varied cultures, right? Focused on the oppression and the empowerment of social diversity. Let's not just do the negatives. Let's also talk about the positives and what brings us together. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Lucero. I see no further member discussion, so I will turn things over to Representative Vang for closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank members for in the committee for their support. This is an important bill. It's actually one of the more exciting bills I'm carrying this session, as it's, we recognize that we need to do better for our mental health needs here and for our community, and especially during this time of crisis. And so once again, just thank you all, and I'll be happy to ask for your support.
Thank you, Representative Vang. I will renew my motion that House File 970 be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Health, Finance, and Policy. Mr. Brown will take the roll. The chair votes aye.
Vice Chair Katiza-Wattoon.
Aye.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Aye.
Representative Barr.
Aye.
Representative Carlson.
Carlson, aye.
Representative Davney.
Aye.
Representative Elkins.
Aye.
Representative Haley. Representative Cagle.
Haley votes aye.
Thank you. Representative Cagle.
Aye.
Representative Lee.
Lee, aye.
Representative Lilly.
Lily, aye.
Representative Lislegard. Representative Lucero.
Yes.
Representative Olson.
Aye.
Representative Farr.
Aye.
Representative Rasmussen.
Rasmussen, aye.
Representative Richardson.
Aye.
Representative Tice.
Tice, aye.
With 17 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and House File 970 is recommended to be referred to the Committee on Health, Finance, and Policy. Thank you, Representative Vang. The next bill on the agenda is House File 1576. Welcome to the committee, Representative Bahner. I will move House File 1576 be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Health, Finance, and Policy. Representative Bahner, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bill before you is really quite simple. The language is not long or complicated. What is complicated is the way that we pay for and reimburse prescription drugs. We've devised elaborate methods designed to save money, but ultimately they fall significantly short, in some cases costing more across the system than straightforward methods. In theory, reimbursement rates should cover the cost of dispensing the drug, including the cost of the drug itself, the pill bottle, the labels, and the cost of the pharmacist's time and counseling. The reality is that often these rates fall short. While larger chain pharmacies can often smooth out these anomalies over time, it's increasingly harder for your corner drugstore to survive. With clawbacks, shrinking margins, and reimbursement rates that often don't cover costs, these local resources are in danger of being lost. More Americans see their local pharmacist more frequently than their own physician. In small drugstores across the state, pharmacists are a trusted member of the community. Many know their patients by name and their drug history by heart. Often catching errors in prescriptions or incorrect dosages and potential adverse drug reactions or fancy computer software even find it. These resources are indispensable. The bill before you is simple. It asks to remove the prohibition on discussing reimbursement rates, to allow pharmacists to have the conversations about fair compensation to cover their costs. The bill does not change rates or dictate prices. It's simply about transparency and fairness. Transparency that may be the first step on the path to saving these cornerstones of the community and a trusted resource in your pharmacist. And with that, Mr. Chair, I do have Ms. Durr here to say a few words in support of the bill and, of course, to help with any questions.
Thank you, Representative Bahner. Ms. Durr.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Dr. Sarah Durr, and I am a pharmacist by training and the executive director of the Minnesota Pharmacists Association. Thank you for allowing me to testify today on behalf of pharmacists, community pharmacies, and independent pharmacy owners. As mentioned, about 95% of patients live within 5 miles of a pharmacy. I am here to testify in support of House File 1576 that would protect our independently owned pharmacies in Minnesota. 2 years ago, the Minnesota legislature enacted a new chapter of insurance law that put in place for the first time licensure and regulation of pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. The Minnesota Chapter 62W does several things, but central to one of its sections is the legal framework that guides the contractual business relationship between a pharmacy, the payer, and the PBM. The PBM is subcontracted by the health insurer, or HMO, here in Minnesota. Also in 62W, there is a section that removes the prevention on what pharmacists can say or do in relation to the cost information of a medication provided to patients. This is commonly referred to as a gag clause, which meant before 2019 that pharmacists in Minnesota were contractually obligated not to discuss the actual cost of the medication with their patients. 62W prohibits a PBM from enacting a gag clause in contracts with pharmacies. HF 1576 would expand upon 62W by adding provisions that prohibit PBMs from contractually preventing a pharmacist from communicating with or speaking to the health insurer who subcontracts with the PBM. This additional protection for pharmacists and pharmacy owners would allow them to discuss their reimbursement with the health insurer. Many pharmacy owners and pharmacists are forced to sign these take it or leave it contracts that don't pay the drug acquisition cost and then oftentimes have arbitrary and unexplained retroactive fees. This legislation would allow pharmacists not only to speak with PBMs, but also have the right to speak with their health insurer who has designed the benefit plan. Please support HF 1576, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Durr. I don't see any further testifiers. Representative Haley had your hand up. I see you've taken it down. I don't know if your question was answered or.
I think my question was answered, Mr. Chair, by the testifier.
Okay, thank you, Representative Haley. Any further discussion or questions to the bill? Seeing none, any closing comments, Representative Bahner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we realize that things like reimbursement rates are complicated and that there's a long road ahead to sort that through. This bill is really just a first step in allowing those conversations to happen and talk about what that looks like so that we can make sure that we find a path that ensures that our local pharmacies, particularly in small towns across greater Minnesota and on your corner in our larger cities, is still available there for you as a resource. Again, these are folks who often know their patients better than anyone else. They see them at the very least once a month. And certainly we want to make sure that these resources are available, that we can have that critical conversation to start talking about reimbursement rates. Thank you to Mr. Chair and the committee.
Thank you, Representative Bahner. With that, I will renew my motion that House File 1576 be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Health, Finance, and Policy. And Mr. Brown will take the roll. The chair votes aye.
Vice Chair Katiza-Watun.
Aye.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Minnesota vaccine.
Representative Barr.
Aye.
Representative Carlson.
Carlson, aye.
Representative Daphne.
Daphne, aye.
Representative Elkins.
Aye.
Representative Haley.
Aye.
Representative Cagle.
Aye.
Representative Lee.
Lee, aye.
Representative Lilly.
Lily, aye.
Representative Lucero.
Yes.
Representative Olson.
Aye.
Representative Farr.
Aye.
Representative Rasmussen.
Rasmussen, aye.
Representative Richardson.
Aye.
Representative Tice.
Tice, aye.
Representative O'Driscoll.
With 16 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails, and House File 1576 is recommended to be referred to the Committee on Health, Finance, and Policy. Thank you, Representative Bahner. The next bill on the agenda is House File 1493, which is my bill, so I will pass the virtual gavel to Representative Katiza-Watun.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as Chair Stephenson mentioned, next we have House File 1493. Chair Stephenson, would you like to move your bill?
I will move that House File 1493 be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Very good. Chair Stephenson moves that House File 1493 be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. And it looks like you have an author's amendment labeled A1, Chair Stephenson. Would you like to move that now?
I would move the A1 amendment, which is an amendment that get the bill in the shape I'd like the committee to consider.
Very good. Chair Stephenson moves the A1 amendment. Is there any discussion to the amendment, members? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion prevails and the A1 amendment is adopted. Chair Stephenson, do you have also an author's amendment labeled A3?
I do. Why have one when you can do two? I would move the A3, also an author's amendment. I think this one adds an appropriation.
All right, thank you. Chair Stephenson moves the A3 amendment. Members, any discussion to the A3 amendment? And seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The motion prevails and the A3 amendment is adopted. Chair Stephenson, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, the student loan crisis in the United States is just mammoth. Total student loan debt has surpassed credit card debt to become the second largest class of debt in the United States, with students owing a stunning $1.7 trillion. Here in Minnesota, there are over 775,000 student borrowers holding some $27 billion in debt. Those numbers are so big, they're hard to put in perspective. But I'll just remind members that we have about a $50 billion general fund budget that we manage on a 2-year cycle. So another way to looking at this is that the students of Minnesota owe enough money to operate the state of Minnesota's general fund for 1 whole year. The problem is also escalating quickly. Student debt increased by 127% between 2007 and 2017.
So I was on the phone trying to do this caucus thing, and
It's also a statewide problem. 51% of millennials in greater Minnesota report owing student debt, and a report from the Federal Reserve Bank identified student debt as the primary reason why young people choose to move from rural communities to the cities. Student loan debt is endlessly complex. There are a confusing labyrinth of repayment plans, forbearance options, and refinance opportunities. If a borrower makes even the slightest misstep, they can watch their debt balloon out of control and see themselves suddenly become ineligible for forgiveness programs that they may have planned their entire education around. Minnesota law is stunningly inadequate at protecting student borrowers from even the most basic bad behavior by the private companies that service their debt. And that's why I'm bringing forward this bill, a student borrower's bill of rights, designed to help ensure our students aren't misled or maltreated by their student loan servicers. This bill should help avoid catastrophic situations like the one that has developed around the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This federal program, which has been in place since 2007, promises borrowers that if they work for a not-for-profit or a public service setting for 10 years, the federal government will forgive the balance of their loan. But when the first batch of borrowers applied for forgiveness, the federal government rejected over 95% of the applications. Thousands of applicants have been placed by their servicers onto the wrong payment plan to be eligible for the program, or engaged in a refinance that made themselves ineligible, or hadn't gotten their employment certified. 10 years and thousands of dollars of payments, all for naught. In a moment, you're going to hear from some testifiers who have some stories about how the student loan industry has impacted their lives. But I did want to highlight for the committee how thankful I am that this bill has been, and I hope will continue to be, a bipartisan endeavor. The Senate author is Senator Zach Duckworth. The bill has been through 2 committees in the House and received bipartisan support in both of them, including a 15-to-1 vote in the Judiciary Committee last week. It also passed unanimously through the Senate Higher Education Committee yesterday. So I'm grateful for that broad support and eager to continue to work with my colleagues across the aisle to continue to build support for this needed bill. And with that, Madam Chair, I believe I have a few testifiers.
Thank you, Chair Stephenson. So the first on the list, I have Mr. Ron Elwood with Legal Aid. Mr. Elwood, could you introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Ron Elwood with Legal Aid, and I am pleased to be here today to testify in strong support of House File 1493, the Student Borrower Bill of Rights. As you know, Legal Aid represents low-income Minnesotans, elder Minnesotans, and Minnesotans with disabilities across the state. The inclusion of servicer standards in particular in this bill would greatly benefit all students, but specifically the students who are clients of legal aid. Our clients are, of course, low income, but what may be surprising is they typically fall into two categories: older students and students who attend for-profit entities. In Minnesota, between 2012 and 2017, the number of student loan borrowers who are 60 years of age or older has increased by 46%. Nationally, the aggregate student debt among older borrowers has increased by more than 1,200%. And those students who are attending for-profit entities are less likely to graduate and have more student debt than those of public and private colleges. And finally, one other fact I think is important here. According to the United States Department of Education, borrowers of color and women borrowers struggle more to pay down their original student debts. House File 1493 has many excellent provisions, but I'd just like to highlight one of the most important. This bill would require an evaluation of whether the borrower was eligible for and informed about income-based loan repayment programs. Those programs are far more favorable to students than forbearance programs to which many students are steered by unscrupulous servicers and which only serve to increase their debt. During the foreclosure crisis, Minnesota established standards for mortgage loan servicers, which created a fair playing field and helped eliminate adverse outcomes for homeowners. There is no reason why, given the student loan crisis, that similar standards should not be established for student loan borrowers. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on House File 1493, and I urge the committee's support.
Thank you, Mr. Elwood. Next, we have Destiny Belmont. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Representative Stephenson and committee members. My name is Destiny Belmont. I'm a school psychologist with Benton Stearns Education District, which is a special education cooperative in central Minnesota, serving 6 school districts. There's an extreme shortage of school psychologists in Minnesota, especially in the greater Minnesota schools. I went to graduate school at Minnesota State University Moorhead for 3 years to obtain my master's and specialist degrees in school psychology. The program is 4 years of graduate studies condensed into 3, so all students were strongly encouraged to not have jobs during enrollment. My journey to become a school psychologist was an expensive and arduous process. However, I had high hopes that I was going to make a difference in the lives of children and their families, and it would all be worth the effort. The cost of tuition was concerning, but I was made aware of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program to ease my mind. I graduated in the spring of 2008 with $50,721.95 in student loans. I started making payments 6 months later. I vividly remember seeing only $1.83 of my first payment go towards principal. For more than 10 years, my loan servicer put me on several different payment plans, even though most of the time I never requested the changes. And for many of those payments, $0 went towards my principal. This caused me great stress and anguish as the financial burden never seemed to decrease. On April 5th, 2019, I applied for public service loan forgiveness for the first time. According to my records, I had made 120 payments and was finally eligible. 2 months later, I was denied. They told me I wasn't on the correct payment plan and I'd only made 21 qualifying payments. I would not be eligible for another 8 years. I felt defeated. That same month, my loan was transferred and split into 2 different loans. The total, $51,056.72. This was more than $300 above what I had originally borrowed and had been paying off for over the past decade. I applied for loan forgiveness 5 more times, and I finally got into contact with a group of knowledgeable individuals who helped with this loan forgiveness. And I was given the right questions to ask of the customer service representatives. On August 19th, 2020, I was finally granted full forgiveness of my student loans. I took out $50,721.95 in student loans. I paid a total of $36,551.45. and I had $49,572.83 forgiven. Therefore, only $1,149.12 was applied towards my principal over the course of almost 12 years. This isn't right. Loan servicers are taking advantage of Minnesotans, many who, like myself, are going into education, healthcare, and other public services. It's time to regulate student loan servicers and represent the interests of borrowers, not corporations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Belmont. Next, Heather Bakke. Please introduce yourself and state your name for the record. Do we have Ms. Bakke on the line? Oh, there you
I
are.
did not unmute. I apologize.
Not a problem. You were on my second page, so I found you there. Go right ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Heather Bakke. I'm a high school special education teacher at Gibbon, Fairfax, Winthrop Junior and Senior High School in Greater Minnesota. I am also the president of my local teachers union. GFW is located in Greater Minnesota, as I said, where we are not immune from the problems of recruiting and retaining teachers. In our district, the base salary for teachers is $38,034, and it makes it difficult to make ends meet. But in many of these teachers' cases, they are paying anywhere from $300 a month to more than $1,000 a month on student loans, basically another car payment or even a mortgage payment. So what does this mean for our teachers? Many are putting off life decisions like buying a home or having children. Others are working second or third jobs to make ends meet. These massive debt loads don't just affect the borrowers. Some of my colleagues who have paid off their own student loans are now trying to do what they can to ease the burden for their adult children. In 1995, I graduated from college with a social studies degree. At the time, I joked that the principal could throw a rock out the front door of the school and hit 10 social studies teachers. I struggled for years to find a permanent job. I did a lot of subbing assignments, including in Representative Dabney's classroom in Buffalo. I got a variance to teach special education. I moved to Alaska to teach. And finally, I went back to school to get certified to teach special education. The good news is that I love being a special ed teacher. The bad news, during those years, I struggled to find a permanent job. I deferred my loans and added more interest to debt I couldn't afford to pay back. I've spent a lot of time and effort trying to figure out how to get these loans paid off. I consolidated my loans and I'm in the federal public service loan forgiveness program. The idea is that I will continue to work in my school and make payments for 10 years and my loans will be forgiven. Dealing with the loan service providers has made me wish that I would have gotten a legal degree as well to deal with all the paperwork. To have my loans forgiven through the federal program, I need to make 120 qualifying payments. When you look at your paperwork and the amount of payments you have made, it is never correct. Each month you need to double and triple check to make sure they are crediting each payment towards the magic number of 120. In 2017, the first group of public service loan forgiveness enrollees should have had the rest of their loans forgiven, but less than 1% were actually approved. People who wondered where they had gone wrong were told again and again that there was a problem with their paperwork. These loan servicers are preying on borrowers, hoping they will just get tired of fighting and give up. That's why the Student Borrower Bill of Rights is so important. It would give teachers like me an advocate to help when I am getting the runaround from my loan company. It would help Minnesotans know their rights when it comes to their loans and offer assistance when there is a problem. Most importantly, it would require loan servicers to be licensed and have to adhere to standards or face consequences. I want to thank you for hearing my testimony and listening to my experience about student loans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bakke. It takes a very special person to be a special ed teacher. That is all I have for the author's testifiers. So we will move to member discussion and questions. Members, any questions or discussion on House File 1493? Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the bill author. Are there any, for any other loan servicers, whether that's for consumer loans, auto loans, mortgaging, does the Commerce Department or the state of Minnesota currently have a licensing process for any of those servicers, or would this be kind of unique for the student loan industry?
Chair Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Rasmussen, the Commerce Department licensed a great number of lending institutions. Most significantly, of course, are banks, community banks, and credit unions who generate a lot of the loans that you were just referencing. Can you remind me, you asked about specific institutions, and then I've already blanked on what the other ones were.
Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No worries, Representative Stephenson. I was, more focused on because here it's my understanding that we're licensing, not necessarily the lending institutions, but actually the servicers of the loans. And so I was wondering if currently the Commerce or any other agency in the state of Minnesota has a licensing process for other loan servicers for auto loans, mortgages, etc.
Chair Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Rasmussen for clarifying. I misunderstood your question. I think one thing that's important to answer in that, and then I see Ms. Verdejas on the line from the Department of Commerce, and so I might punt to her to answer to make sure I get the answer correctly. But the distinction that I would note, or I see Ms. Pompu's raising her hand, she might be able to answer as well. But the important distinction that I would point out is that the student loan industry is, I think, fairly unique in that almost all student loan debt originates these days with the federal government. They are the lender, but they don't service the loans. There's these servicing companies that are otherwise unregulated, right? And in fact, the bill doesn't require a license. If you had an independent community bank or a community bank that offered a student loan, they wouldn't have to be licensed under this bill. This is only targeting servicing companies. And, I don't know that genre exists as much in, auto loans and other things. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I think it's a kind of a unique phenomenon in the student loan industry. But I see Ms. Pompu is available. And I also see that Mr. Zappia from the Department of Commerce is available. So they might have a better answer than I do.
Chair and members, I just wanted to note that residential mortgage loan servicers are licensed by the Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Ms. Pompu. Mr. Chair, do you want any further follow-up on that?
Unless Mr. Zappia has anything to add to that, or Commissioner Zappia, I should say.
Commissioner Zappia?
Chair Stephenson, Representative Rasmussen, that's the best example we have. There's other license types that kind of servicing might result in an originator license, but for servicing, it would be the non-bank mortgage servicers.
Thank you for that. Representative Rasmussen, any follow-up?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that information. I very much appreciate it. And thank you, Representative Stephenson, for bringing forward this discussion on the student loan situation. It's something can you hear me? Great. It's something that I think is a really important issue across Minnesota. And so I'm glad we're talking about it today. The one caution that I have is we've heard a lot of talk from the new Biden administration on actions that they might take at a national level through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau when it comes to these loan servicers. And they've underscored a lot of the issues that Representative Stephenson and the testifiers have brought up today. And so I worry about us kind of creating this parallel state infrastructure and just worry that that could maybe unnecessarily add costs to our student loan process that could potentially get passed on to student borrowers. But I do appreciate the discussion, and I think it's something we should continue to talk about. I just personally think that we should wait and see what the Biden administration is going to do and what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau actions could take for a national framework for protecting student borrowers who find themselves in really challenging situations. But I appreciate the discussion today. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Representative Haley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Stephenson. I have similar concerns as Representative Rasmussen just asked, but also a few questions. Representative Stephenson, how many loan servicers operate in the state of Minnesota today? What's the scope of this universe that you are trying to regulate?
Chair Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Haley, the fiscal note for the bill identifies that there's 20 entities that would probably be subject to licensing under this bill. As I kind of alluded in my answer to Representative Rasmussen, there are other financial institutions that are already regulated that would not be subject to this bill, like banks, community banks, credit unions.
Representative Haley.
Thank you. And Chair Stephenson, I noticed that the U of M is not included in this list. And are they a loan servicer? Are other higher education institutions also servicers?
Chair Stephenson.
You know, Representative Haley, that provision was added last biennium to this bill, and I might have to get back to you on that one. My recollection, and I don't know if there's someone else on the call who or on the Zoom who has a better answer than this, but my recollection is that they have a program that isn't really loan servicing. It's like offering advice to students about how to manage debt, that they were concerned would fall under this. And so that's why we exempted them. They're not actually servicing loans, but they're like helping guide students. And as I recall, that's the purpose for that exclusion.
Representative Haley. And Chair Stephenson, another question. Is your language patterned after any other states that took similar action? And do you know how many other states have done this? Kind of along the lines of Representative Rasmussen's questions, if the federal government is looking at something that would be universally applied, I'm kind of wondering how you landed on your language and if it was patterned after any other states that are doing the same work.
Chair Stephenson.
Thanks for that question, Representative Haley. Yes, there are a number of other states that have taken this approach. I recall when Colorado passed this bill last biennium, Maryland has done it. I know there are other states beyond that. I don't have the total number on, again, if there's someone else on the Zoom who might have that answer, I would defer to them. But I know there are a number of states that have done so. I did, in terms of developing the language, we did slim the bill down a little bit this year from where it was 2 years ago, tried to listen to the concerns that my colleagues on the Republican side had raised and addressed them in the bill this year, which is why I'm pleased it's garnered such bipartisan support so far.
Thank you, Chair Stephenson. Representative Haley, any further questions?
Yes, I just had kind of some closing comments. Thank you, Madam Chair. I still have some questions on the bill, Representative Stephenson, but appreciate your work on it. This is a significant issue. I just wanted to remind committee members as well that we have done things in the past to support student borrowers. I was in fact chief author of a First in the Nation bill back in 2017, where we provided student loan tax credits. And that is still in our tax code and something that I also think we should expand on. We also had a bill that was included in the 2018 omnibus that provided student loan debt counseling. And I had done a significant research at that time on that bill and identified the kind of subset of borrowers that were struggling the most, and really successful free counseling that we could provide that specifically guided them through how to work with the loan servicers and restructure their loans. And so that might be something as well that we can go back and look at. And additionally, I think, and this is maybe more way on the front end, but I believe that Representative Erdahl has a bill moving through this session that includes financial studies as part of high school curriculum. I think that's something that we hear often, that we've lost that in our high school curriculum, and not directly associated with this, but I think of just a piece of the puzzle. So I appreciate your work on it. Wanted to remind folks that you know, we've taken bites out of this with past legislation, and there's some other things that we can probably look at. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Haley. And Per the speaker's instruction, we are going to recess now to the call of the chair. It will not be earlier than 6 p.m. I see Representative Lucero, Representative O'Driscoll, and I believe Representative Davney also had their hands raised. So we will follow up with member questions at that time. So we will use the original 6 p.m. Zoom link that was sent out originally, and we will see you a little bit later.
Before you go, Madam Chair, DFL members, please, you got an email about a very, very brief caucus I would like us to do right at the start of the recess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are in recess.